Hello and welcome back to the channel for another Construct 3 tutorial. In the last tutorial video I made, we made this project right here where we could hover our player character over an object and hold down the spacebar, and we have this little meter kind of animate in. This project is set up very similarly, but it is a lot less involved, a lot less complicated, and I have it set up to activate when I press the spacebar, so I'll press the spacebar, and we get a solid circle that animates onto the screen. And then we can reset it, and I'll do it again. All right, thanks for clicking on this video today. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please go ahead and hit that big red button. Hit that thumbs up while you're at it. I always appreciate the support. I'm going to create a new project. I'm going to call mine Radial Progress Bar, and I'm going to go with the 1080p landscape. That gives us a 1920 by 1080. Okay, so I'm going to create this project. What I like to do when I start is get our viewport size over here, highlight it, Control-C to copy, click on our layout, go to size, highlight that, Control-V to paste, click, and we now have the viewport size the same size as our work area. Okay, I'm going to go over here to the layer 0 in our layers panel, click on that, bring up its properties, and go down to transparent, and I'm going to click on that, make sure it's checked. Okay, we only need a couple of objects, so I'm going to go ahead and create those now, and then we can talk about how this is going to play out. So let's double click to bring up this box. Let's get a sprite, and I'll place that. And if we go up to size, by default it should be 250 by 250. I'm going to keep it at that right now. And then I'm going to grab the circle tool, and I'm going to get a solid white color. And then border thickness, I want 20, center and fill unchecked, and border checked. So you can see our starting point for the circle is pretty small, kind of hard to see. That's because we're zoomed way out to see the full 250 by 250 area. What I want to do is I want to start in the very top left corner and then drag all the way down to the bottom right corner. But I don't know if I'm actually in the last pixel in the very corner of the top left. So we can zoom in, but now when we click and drag, we can't see the rest of our work area here. But what we can do while we keep holding down on that left mouse button, you have a scroll wheel on your mouse. You can scroll down or up or down. And then when we get down here, what we can do is hover our mouse over this slider and then press and hold the middle mouse button and slide it over to the right side. And now we can put our cursor right there in the bottom right and let go of our left mouse button. And let's zoom out. Now we have a circle that is tangent with all sides, top, bottom, left, and right sides. So we are filling the entire 250 by 250 area. I just wanted to show you that this is something that is possible inside the animations editor for Construct 3. I thought it was kind of a helpful little find, and I actually found it out by accident. So I wanted to share that with you. So now I need this circle split up into two halves. And a really easy way we can get exactly half is by using our grid. So I'm going to come up here and configure grid. And I want 125 by 125. That is exactly half of 250 by 250. And make sure snap is set to edges. Hit OK, and then turn the grid on. And as I move the mouse around, you can see that our starting point is snapping to the edges where all the grid lines intersect. So I'm going to get our selection tool and just click and drag until we have the left half of the circle selected. And then we come up here and press the crop tool. Just press it once and it will crop it to what we have selected. And then one last thing, let's go to our origin point and make sure that it is located in the right middle. If not, you can right click on origin up here, go to quick assign and choose right. We can exit out of that. I'm going to rename this circle. Okay, so I want this half circle to be, I want our full circle to be in the middle of the screen. I can go over to its position, and I know that our layout size is 1920 by 1080. So for the X, I can just say 1920 divided by 2 and hit enter, and it gives us 960. And for the y, I can punch in 1080 divided by 2, and it gives us exactly in the middle, according to our anchor point, which is this little origin point node right there. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in just a little. And with that selected, I'm going to hold Control, click, and drag out a copy. And I want this to face the other way so we have a full circle. So I'm going to change its angle to 180 degrees. And then we can click on our original circle, highlight its position, Control-C to copy. Click on our new half circle, highlight its position, Control-V to paste. And now we have a full circle right in the middle of the screen. Play that, and there it is. Okay, double click to add another object. Let's get a sprite and insert that. So I want this to cover the half circle. So half of 250 by 250 was 125 by 125. But I want this to actually be just slightly larger than the half circle to make sure that when we start moving it around, it covers everything we need it to cover. So I'm going to go with 130 for the width and 255 for the height. Okay, we can turn our grid off. And then the origin point, I want on the left side in the middle. And then we can get our fill tool. And I'm going to go with a solid black. And actually, this has to be a solid black for this to work. This part is pretty important. It needs to be solid black, and the origin point needs to be in that location. Okay, that's it. Let's exit out of that. Let's rename this mask. So how this is going to work is this is going to be covering 1/2 of the circle at one time. We will rotate it so that it reveals that half of the circle. So I'm going to set that back to 0, and I'm actually going to go in here, click on our half circle, and copy its position, and click on our mask and paste in there. Okay, so for our mask to reveal the circle, we don't want to see our mask. So we're going to use a blend mode to make it an actual mask object. So with the mask selected, let's go over to the properties, scroll down until we find blend mode, and I'm going to change that to destination out. Nothing happened. It's still this black rectangle object covering up our half circle. But if we go over to our layer 0 in the layers panel, click on it, and in its properties, down here under appearance, we have force on texture. Check that, and now our mask is gone, but it's also covering our circle. So if I click here, the mask object is still there, and if we move it around, it makes parts of the circle disappear. I could leave it right there, and if we play, there's our circle masked out in this top left area. I'm going to undo that, set it back to its position. Now to get our mask to rotate so that it reveals the circle, I'm going to just give it a behavior so that it rotates on its own. So over in the properties, behaviors, add new behavior. Let's scroll down and get the rotate behavior. And I can preview this and it just rotates. And if I change the speed, it rotates faster. And if I put a minus in front of it, it rotates the other direction. But I'm going to go with 150. I think that's a good speed. We're mostly set up here. We can start setting up the mechanic. And before we do that, let's make sure that we are saving as often as we can remember to do so. If you have not saved your project yet, you will have to give it a file name and make sure that it is in a folder where you know where it is. So I'm going to go ahead and save mine. Okay, now that we have our mask able to rotate, when we get to coding, I'm going to need a way to make sure that we can turn the rotation on and off. Because right now, as long as it's enabled, it's just going to keep rotating around and around and around. And I only want it to rotate enough to reveal one side, and then we'll make some changes, and then it'll keep rotating to reveal the second side, and then we're going to need it to stop so that it doesn't try to mask out anything else. So to do that, we're going to set up a variable. So with mask object selected, let's go to instance variables, new variable, and I'm going to call this rotating, and that will be a Boolean, a true or false. Okay, let's go over to our event sheet. And now that we have that Boolean variable set up, let's decide what happens with it. So let's add an event, go to our mask, and I'm going to just type in Boolean is Boolean instance variable set. There's rotating. It's the only one we have. Hit done. So this means is the variable true? And if it is, let's add an action, go into mask, scroll down to our rotation and set enabled. Change that to enable. As long as the Boolean is true, we are rotating. So let's click in a blank area of that block and hit X on the keyboard. That will give us an else statement. So this is Boolean is true. This just means Boolean is false. And we can highlight this action, control, click, and drag a copy of it down. Click to go into it and change that to disabled. So anytime we want the rotation to stop, we'll just set that variable to false. For the purpose of this project, I'm going to set up a way that we can just press the space key and that will get our meter started. To do that, we need to get the keyboard object. Let's go over to the project panel, right click on object types folder, add a new object type, and I'll type in keyboard. We want the keyboard. So now that we have the keyboard object, we can go into add another event, go into our keyboard, and on key pressed. And I will click to choose the space key. All right. And what happens when we press the space key? Well, I want that mask to start rotating so it can reveal the circle. Add an action, go into mask. I'm going to type in Boolean, set Boolean, rotating to true. And I want this to be read by construct 3 before we start deciding what our variables do. So I'm going to click and drag this up above. And another thing I'm going to do is stretch this out so we can see it. And I'm also going to increase the font size so everything is easier to read on screen. Okay, so if we play, there's our mask is hiding our half circle. It's not rotating because we gave it a Boolean and said if it's false, which it is by default, it's false, it's not rotating. But if we hit the space bar, it starts to rotate, and now it just looks like we have a half circle rotating around. So you can kind of see how the masking process is going to work with that. Okay, I'm going to go over to the layout, and I want to try to explain how this mechanic is going to work. So when we start rotating this mask, it will start to reveal that half circle on the right side. When we start going over to the other side, we're going to want to reveal that left side of the circle. But if you notice, as we rotate that direction, the mask starts covering up the right side again. So the way we can get around that is to manipulate the Z order of everything. So this mask only masks what's underneath it when we have it set to destination out. So I have a Z order panel up. If you have the free version of Construct 3, I don't believe you get this panel. And if you do have the subscription to Construct 3 and don't have the Z panel up, it's in Menu, View, Bars, and Z order bar. And something that Construct 3 does, I'm not quite sure, it doesn't show all the objects in each layer sometimes. But if you right-click on the layer and show active layer only, you get all your objects back on that layer. So there's our two half circles and our mask. And this is how it's layered and how it's rendered out when Construct 3 runs the project. So circle 2, if I click on it, it shows that's our left half circle. And circle 3 is our right side half circle. And then the mask is on top of those. If circle 3 moves up the Z order and is on top of the mask, now the mask is not covering that right side. So what's going to have to happen here is we're going to start out with a blank screen, meaning the progress bar is not showing up. To do that, we're going to have to cover one side with the mask, which is what we're doing to the right side, and the other side is going to have to be set to invisible. So this won't be showing, but our right side is showing, it's just covered up by a mask. So when we start rotating and we reveal that right half circle, that's when we'll make the changes. We will move that right side circle to the top of the Z order, and then we'll turn that left side of the half circle visible because now the mask is covering it, but we'll turn it visible so that it can continue to rotate and reveal that. That is basically how this is going to work. So to be able to move our right side of the circle to the top and our left side of the circle to be invisible and visible, we're going to need to be able to identify which instance of this object we are trying to tell what to do. Because this is all one object. If we say make circle invisible, it will make both instances invisible. Same thing with moving the Z order around. So we need to individualize these two instances. So what I'm going to do is click on our circle object in the project panel and come over here to the properties, and let's add an instance variable. Add a new one, and I will call this one side. And I'm going to change this to a string so we can just type in which side is what. So now if we just click on this left side or this half circle, we can come over here to our new instance variable and just type in left. No quotation marks or anything, just the word left. And then if we click over here on the right side, well, that mask is on top, so that's the first thing we're going to click. If an object is covered by another object and you want to select it, hover your mouse over where that object is, hold down the Tab key on your keyboard and click. And now we have the circle selected. But there's nothing in the side instance variable because this is a different instance. So this one, we can just say right. Let's go back over to the event sheet and let's remember to save as often as we can. So when we first start the project, I don't want that circle or our progress bar to be visible at all. I want to be able to press the space bar and reveal it. So let's add an event and go into System and type in Start on Start of Layout. And then I'm going to move this whole block to the very top because that's the first thing I want to happen when this script is read. At the start of layout, I want to check for both sides of the circle, the left and the right. But I'm already checking for on start of layout. So if I want to check for something else, I'm going to have to put it in a sub event. So let's highlight the whole block, B on the keyboard to create a sub event, and then we can double click to go into the sub event, go to circle, and scroll down to compare instance variable. There's our side, it's a string, and in between quotation marks, I'm going to type in left. And then if we click to select the whole block, we can copy it with Control-C to copy and Control-V to paste. Then double click into the second one and change left to right. On the start of the layout, if the object has left as its variable, I want that to be invisible. So let's add an action to that. Go into circle and I'm going to type in visible, set visible to invisible. And then when it's the right side, we want to make sure that it is below the mask so that it is covered up and we can't see it. Let's add an action, go into circle, and I'm going to type in bottom, move to bottom. And that's the Z order that it's talking about. So now when we play, there's nothing there. This side is invisible, this side's covered up by a mask, and if I hit the space key, we reveal that one side. Now it's not going to do anything for the left side because it's still invisible. Okay, let's go back over to the layout, and I just want to show you this. I'm going to click on the mask, and when we reveal that right side, we angle around, we rotate until it's fully revealed. At that point, that's when I want to move this right side to the top of the layer so that it's no longer below the mask, it's above the mask. And I want the left side to not be invisible anymore. So when we get halfway, which would actually be 180 degrees, that's when I want to make those changes. So we can check to see if our mask is in between two angles and then make those changes. I'm going to set that back to 0, go back to the event sheet, and I have a little protractor graphic here. And this is how Construct 3 sees angles. 0 is straight to the right and goes down and increases in degrees. So 0, 10, 20, 30, 90, 180, 270, and then back around to 360, which is the same as 0. So if we start at 0, half rotation is 180. So when we're between 0 and 180, we want our progress bar to be in one particular state. And then once it passes 180 and is in between 180 and 360, we can set up the other state. So let's go ahead and check for that. Let's add an event, go to our mask, and the very first one here highlighted is in between angles. So our first angle is going to be 0, and then I'm going to check for that 180. So when it is between 0 and 180, I want to check for the left and right side again so that we can tell each side what to do at all times. So let's highlight this whole block and press B to get a sub event. And then we can double click to go in that, go into our circle, scroll down to compare instance variable. Our side, I want to know about the left side. And then we can highlight that whole block, Control C to copy, Control V to paste, and go into the second one and change left to right. Okay, so if it's in between 0 and 180, and you see here's our mask, that's our starting point, its angle is at 0, and as we rotate it, it goes up to 180. So in between 0 and 180, we want to make sure that that right side is still being revealed, so it is below the mask, and that the left side is invisible. Add an action, go to our circle, and I'm going to type in visible to invisible. And then the right side is going to be add an action, circle, type in bottom, and move it to the bottom of the layer. So this is how we start out up here. And yes, we did repeat the code, but unless we're only going to run the progress bar once, we're going to need to make sure we can always check for this in order to run that progress bar animation more than once. Okay, let's highlight this whole entire block here. Control C to copy, Control V to paste, and come down here and let's change the angle of degrees here. So if we check from 0 to 180, here we could check from 180 to 360. That actually won't work, because if I type in 180 to start and we do 360 here, construct 3 at runtime reads everything we put in the event sheet as a script. It starts at the top and reads everything in order. If we check for between 0 and 180, this will be true. But as soon as it reaches our second one and it says between 180 and 360, well, 180 is still true. So if it reads this, this is true, but then it reads this, this is also true. So this will happen second. This will override everything that we did up here. So instead of 180, let's just say 180.1. That means we've passed the halfway mark. And then for 360, we have the same issue. The 0 is the same as 360. So when this first reads, it'll say it's true, but then it'll read this right after it, and this will override this again. So instead of 360, let's say 359. Okay, now that we have that set up, this down here is going to be the opposite of everything we have up here. So for side left, let's go and change invisible to visible. And for side right, let's change bottom layer to move to top. Okay, now let's play that. And I hit space, and there we go. Now it resets every time it makes a full circle because the code is telling it what to do depending on what angle the mask is at that time. Okay, the way we remedy that is we stop the rotation. So let's add an event and go into our mask and in between angles. And for this one, I'm going to figure out when we've completed a full circle. So once we pass this 359 degrees, we can go ahead and tell the mask to stop rotating. So our first angle is going to be that 359, and then our second angle will be the full circle, which is 360. So when it gets to that 1 degree, then we can go in, add an action, go to our mask, and then we already have this rotation disabled set up here. So all we need to do is set our Boolean variable to false, so it will disable it. So go down to set Boolean and rotating to false. And let's play that. And so we have a little bit of an issue. It disappeared. And we also have this one little uncovered line of the circle right here. That's because in between 359 and 360, we stopped the rotation. So there's still a little bit left. So once we are disabled and we are no longer rotating, when we set that to false, we can go ahead and reset our mask's position to its original starting point. So let's add an action to our else statement, go into mask and set angle to 0. And that should take care of that part. And it does. There's no little white line still left. Okay, so what's happening, the reason it is disappearing is because when we reset it to 0, it is now reading this code again because it is between 0 and 180. And it's already covering the right side because we made a full circle, and we're setting that left side to invisible again. So we're basically just resetting the mechanic. But I don't want this to take place until we hit space and tell it to run again. We need to make sure we're not checking for the 0 angle because we have to set it to 0 here to make things look right. So let's go into this first angle check and change that 0 to a 1. And now hit space and we have a full circle. And I can hit space again and it'll just restart. Okay? That is pretty much how the mechanic works. I am going to add one more little thing here. I want a way to where if our progress bar is progressing and let's say you need a way to cancel it. Let's say you're trying to do something in your game and you are interrupted by whatever. We need a way to pull out of the animation process. So I'm going to come in here to our onStart of layout. I'm going to add another key. I'm going to choose the R key for reset, and this will just be our pretend like we are canceling out of our progression. So whether we're at the start of the layout or if we press R, I still want this code to take place. Now, if I come in here and I try to add the press of the R button in our keyboard, the only thing we have is key is down, meaning as long as we're holding it down. But if I did that, then we would have to be holding the key down on the start of layout for both of those things to be true in order for this first piece of code to run. But I want on start of layout or if we press the R key. So if we right click on the block of code and choose make or block, now when we double click to add, we can go into the keyboard and now we have all these other events available to us. And that's because these are triggered events. They have green arrows next to them. That means they're triggered events, which means the triggered event can only take place once. It runs that block of code one time. So I'm going to go on key pressed and I will select the R. So on start of layout or R pressed, and then it will start us over again. So I think this actually has one more little thing we need to do for it. I'll try it. I'll hit space and then I'll hit R and it doesn't do anything. That's because we can set this code to whatever we want, but we're still rotating. We haven't told it to stop rotating when we press R. Therefore, all of this is still being checked and made true. So when we press R or on start a layout, we can add an action, go into our mask, and let's go to that Boolean set rotating to false. So we know that it won't rotate. And then we play, hit space, and then I can hit R and it stops it. I'll hit space again and it finishes, and then I can either hit space again and watch it animate in again, or I can press R and it takes us to the default starting position. Okay, that is all that it takes to make this little mechanic. The main thing I wanted to show was a different way to make a progression bar like we did in that last video. And also I think it's interesting to learn about masking and being able to visually manipulate things on screen by using masks and our Z order. And that's all that's happening is we're changing the Z order of objects and we're rotating a mask around it to give the illusion that we are in fact filling up a progress meter. All right, that is going to do it for this one. Let's make sure that we are saving our project. If you are not already subscribed to the channel, please consider hitting that big red button. And if you like this video, hit that thumbs up for me. I appreciate your support. I'm going to go get started on the next video. Thank you for watching. Stay safe out there, and I will see you in the next one.